Picture a stormy night in ancient Japan, rain lashing against wooden eaves and thunder rumbling through mist-shrouded mountains. In the flickering light of a lone lantern, villagers huddle inside their homes, whispering tales of creatures that roam such nights, beings of immense power and terrifying presence. Among these legends, none inspire more fear or fascination than the Oni, the formidable yokai, whose name alone evokes shivers of dread and awe. These are not mere monsters of folklore. They are complex symbols woven into the very fabric of Japanese culture, representing everything from punishment and chaos to strength and transformation. For centuries, the Oni has captured imaginations, appearing in art, literature, and festivals, its image evolving from a brutish demon to a figure rich with meaning and mystery. But what lies behind those glaring eyes and fearsome horns? Where did these beings come from, and why do they continue to haunt the collective consciousness of Japan? This journey will take us deep into the heart of Japanese mythology, unraveling the origins of the Oni, exploring their varied forms and roles, and revealing how they reflect the fears, values, and spirituality of the society that created them. You are about to step into a world where myth and reality blur, where stories passed down through generations hold hidden truths about human nature itself. From their emergence in ancient texts to their enduring presence in modern media, the Oni remain one of the most compelling figures in global mythology. So settle in and prepare to uncover the secrets of these legendary beings, their power, their symbolism, and the unforgettable mark they've left on history and imagination alike. To truly understand these beings, we first need to define what an Oni is. Imagine a creature of immense stature, its skin often a shocking crimson or a deep, ominous blue or green. Towering horns sprout from its forehead, and its mouth is filled with sharp, predatory fangs. Its wild, unkempt hair frames a face locked in a permanent snarl of rage, and its powerful hands are tipped with claws that can tear through flesh and bone. This is the classic image of the Oni, and it is almost always completed by one iconic accessory: the kanabo, a massive, studded iron club that symbolizes its brute strength and destructive power. This club wasn't just a weapon, it was a statement. Wielding it required incredible might, and folklore often said that an Oni's greatest weakness was its own pride in its strength, sometimes being tripped up by the very club it relied upon. But calling an Oni simply a demon or an ogre, as it's often translated, only tells part of the story. While they are indeed powerful and fearsome yokai, a term for a broad class of supernatural monsters, spirits, and beings in Japanese folklore, they occupy a very specific and terrifying niche. Unlike many yokai who can be mischievous tricksters, neutral nature spirits, or even benevolent guides, the Oni is almost universally a being of malevolence. Their primary role in folklore is that of a punisher and a bringer of calamity. They are the enforcers of karmic justice in Buddhist-influenced tales, serving as wardens in hell, tormenting sinful souls for eternity. On Earth, they are the terrifying explanation for natural disasters, plagues, and unexplained violence, a physical manifestation of chaos and suffering. This sets them apart from other well-known yokai. A kitsune or fox spirit might play clever pranks or even form relationships with humans. A tanuki or raccoon dog is often a jovial, shape-shifting trickster. Even a terrifying spirit like a yurei, a ghost, is typically bound by its own personal grief and vengeance. The Oni, however, is raw, untamed evil. Its violence is rarely personal, it's a fundamental part of its nature. They represent external, overwhelming forces of destruction that society must band together to overcome, whether through the bravery of a legendary hero, the cleverness of a common villager, or the protective power of a sacred ritual. They are the ultimate other, a monster from the outside that threatens the established order, making them a powerful symbol in storytelling for any formidable adversary or challenge. To uncover where these formidable beings began, we must travel back through language itself. The very word oni holds a key to its original nature. In Old Japanese, the term oni or on was written with a character that essentially meant to hide or to conceal. This points to a being that was originally unseen, a spirit, a force, or a presence that was felt rather than visibly encountered. It was a broad concept for something mysterious, potentially dangerous, and otherworldly that lingered just out of sight, perhaps causing misfortune or illness from the shadows. This indigenous idea was profoundly shaped and solidified by the arrival of Buddhist texts and concepts from China. The Chinese character for gui or oni, which depicted a spectral, malevolent spirit, was adopted into Japan and became the standard way to write the word. This imported character carried with it a rich cultural baggage of demonology and underworld mythology. Buddhism introduced a highly structured cosmology that included many hells, each with its own rulers and tormentors. The Japanese oni found a perfect and terrifying new role within this system. They became the brutal jailers and punishers in these Buddhist hells, meting out gruesome karmic justice to sinful souls. This theological import transformed the oni from a vague, hidden spirit into a clearly defined agent of divine punishment. The evolution didn't stop there. Over centuries, as these stories were told and retold, the oni underwent a fascinating physical transformation. The invisible spirit began to take on a concrete, monstrous form in the human imagination. Why did this happen? It likely stems from a very human need to give a recognizable shape to our deepest fears. An abstract, invisible evil is intangible and therefore much harder to confront or even comprehend. By picturing the bringer of plague, disaster, or injustice as a hulking, horned, clawed demon, people could conceptualize the threat. This physical form made the unknown knowable and, in a strange way, manageable. If an oni has a body, then it can, in theory, be outwitted, driven away, or even defeated. This shift from an invisible spirit to a tangible monster reflects a journey from abstract dread to a narrative where humanity could potentially fight back. The oni became the ultimate physical manifestation of life's cruelties and catastrophes, a monstrous explanation for the suffering that often felt random and unjust. With these foundational concepts of their nature and origin in place, we can turn to the pages of Japan's oldest chronicles to witness the oni making their first official appearances in recorded history. The earliest written accounts are found in two seminal 8th century texts, the Kojiki, or Records of Ancient Matters, completed in 712, and the Nihon Shoki, the Chronicles of Japan, finished just 8 years later in 720. These works were commissioned by the imperial court to establish a divine lineage for the emperors and to document the nation's creation myths and early history. Within these grand narratives, the oni begins its literary life not as a fully formed demon, but as a more ambiguous spiritual antagonist. In the Kojiki, one of the most striking early figures is that of Yamatsu Shikome, the ugly female of the land of Yomi. When the creator god Izanagi flees from the underworld after seeing his deceased wife Izanami in a state of decay, she sends these horrifying hags to pursue him. While not called oni explicitly in the text, Yamatsu Shikome embodies their core essence. She is a terrifying, otherworldly female sent to inflict harm, a direct agent of chaos from the land of the dead. This establishes a crucial template, the oni as a monstrous being from a polluted realm of death, threatening the order of the living world. The Nihon Shoki offers another pivotal and slightly more defined early example. During the reign of Emperor Kime in the 6th century, the text records a strange event where a red face appears at the top of a tree and vanishes with a mysterious laugh. This apparition was interpreted by the court as an Aki, or red oni, a malevolent spirit whose appearance was an omen of calamity. This story is incredibly significant because it captures the oni in a state of transition. It is still primarily a spectral phenomenon, an ominous sign, but it is now being explicitly labeled and is beginning to acquire its iconic crimson coloration. These early literary depictions show us that the oni was still coalescing as a concept. They were not yet the uniform, club-wielding brutes of later folklore. Instead, they were often shape-shifting tricksters or embodiments of specific misfortunes. A common theme in these ancient stories is the oni as a manifestation of mono no ki, a malevolent spirit that could cause possession and illness. This connects them directly to human suffering, explaining sudden diseases or strokes as the work of an invisible, attacking force. What's fascinating is how these texts also reveal the oni's deep connection to the other. They were frequently associated with the Amishi people, indigenous groups from northeastern Japan who resisted the rule of the Yamato court based in the west. By depicting these cultural and political outsiders as monstrous oni, the chronicles effectively used mythology to justify imperial expansion and solidify a national identity built in opposition to a perceived savage threat. This practice of linking oni to marginalized groups or foreign invaders would continue for centuries, showing how these mythical beings were often used as political and social tools to demonize those who existed outside the mainstream. In their very first written stories, the oni were already serving a dual purpose, explaining the unexplainable terrors of the world and defining the boundaries of a civilized society by giving a monstrous face to whatever lay beyond its borders. This transformation of the oni into agents of cosmic justice is one of the most profound shifts in their mythology, and it is almost entirely due to the integration of Buddhist thought into Japanese culture. As Buddhism took root, it brought with it a detailed and vivid cosmology of the afterlife, complete with countless hells, each designed for specific sins. The indigenous concept of the oni, once a vague and hidden spirit, found a terrifying new purpose within this structured moral universe. They became the primary enforcers in these realms of punishment, the literal demons of karma. Imagine the scene described in Buddhist texts and depicted in countless paintings. A soul arrives at the court of Enma, the king of hell, to have its life judged. For those found guilty of serious misdeeds, lying, stealing, murder, or disrespect, the sentence is not mere imprisonment but an eternity of tailored torments. And who carries out these brutal sentences? The oni. They are the jailers and the torturers, their forms perfectly suited to their grim work. With their sheer physical power, they crush souls underfoot, pound them with their iron clubs, or tear them apart with their claws. They might force a greedy soul to swallow molten copper, or make a liar's tongue grow endlessly, only to have it devoured by birds. Their role was to embody the inescapable and physical consequence of negative actions, making the abstract idea of bad karma painfully, viscerally real. This portrayal served a crucial didactic purpose. For Buddhist teachers, the oni became a powerful tool for illustrating cause and effect. Sermons and moral tales, known as Setsubun, often featured oni appearing to claim the wicked at the moment of death, dragging them screaming into the underworld. These stories were not just horror tales, they were morality plays designed to encourage virtuous living. The fear of being delivered into the clutches of these monstrous punishers was a potent incentive for following a righteous path. The oni, in this sense, were not just monsters of chaos but became enforcers of a divine, if brutal, order. This spiritual role is magnificently captured in Buddhist art, particularly in the famous hell scrolls of the Heian and Kamakura periods. These elaborate paintings, often stretching over many meters, are meticulous landscapes of suffering, and the oni are everywhere. They are depicted not as mindless brutes but as focused, almost professional tormentors, their faces often set in expressions of grim determination or cruel joy as they go about their duties. Their terrifying visages, painted in stark pigments of red and blue, leap from the scrolls, serving as a constant reminder to the faithful of the fate that awaited those who strayed. In temple sculptures, too, they stand guard, often paired with more benevolent deities representing the two sides of cosmic justice, the compassionate path to enlightenment and the terrible price of ignoring it. Beyond their role as punishers, the Oni also came to symbolize the negative impulses within the human mind itself. In esoteric Buddhist teachings, external demons are often reflections of internal afflictions, greed, anger, and ignorance. The Oni you fear meeting in hell is, in a metaphorical sense, the manifestation of the hatred you nurtured in your own heart. This internalization added a profound psychological layer to their mythology. Conquering an Oni in a story was no longer just about defeating an external monster. It could represent a person's struggle to overcome their own worst nature, to achieve self-mastery and break free from the karmic cycle that leads to such a dreadful rebirth. While their spiritual role was being defined in temples and texts, the Oni was also taking on a remarkably consistent and terrifying physical form in the popular imagination. If you were to close your eyes and picture an Oni, a specific image likely springs to mind. A hulking, muscular humanoid, its skin a vivid, unnatural shade of red or blue, with wild hair, sharp horns, and a face locked in a permanent snarl. This iconic look didn't appear by accident. Every feature is a carefully crafted symbol of its otherness and malevolence. The most common color, a fierce crimson red, is deeply significant. In East Asian color symbolism, red is not just a hue of danger but also a color used to ward off evil. By painting their demons red, artists may have been engaging in a form of sympathetic magic, using the demon's own terrifying image as a talisman to scare away lesser evils and misfortune itself. The blue or green-skinned Oni, often called Ao-Oni, is just as potent. These cooler tones frequently associate them with corpses and decay, linking them more directly to the pollution of death and the damp, chilling dread of the grave. But the variations go far beyond mere color palette. The number of their eyes, fingers, and even toes could shift from story to story, each deviation a marker of something strange and unnatural. A three-eyed Oni isn't just more observant. Its extra eye symbolizes supernatural perception, an ability to see truths and deceptions hidden from mortal beings. Some are depicted with only 3 fingers and toes, a stark anatomical break from humanity that reinforces their status as a completely different order of being. Then there are the horns, perhaps their most defining feature. While 2 is standard, some regional tales speak of Oni with a single, powerful horn or even 3, with the number and curve often hinting at their age, power, or specific origin. Their clothing, too, tells a story. They are famously depicted wearing nothing but a loincloth made of tiger skin. The tiger, a creature symbolizing raw strength and ferocity throughout Asia, is reduced to mere clothing for the Oni, a simple and effective way to communicate that this being is even more powerful than the most fearsome natural predator. These physical traits weren't uniform across Japan. Local cultures adapted the Oni to fit their own landscapes and fears. In coastal regions, you might encounter Yumi Oni or Sea Oni, described as monstrous horned whales or twisted, demonic cephalopods that capsized boats and devoured fishermen. In the mountains, the Yamaworo blend aspects of an Oni with those of a mountain goblin, covered in hair and possessing knowledge of the wilderness, sometimes helpful but often mischievous and dangerous. This regional diversification shows how the core idea of the Oni was a flexible template, a supernatural blank canvas upon which communities could project their specific environmental dangers and anxieties. A farming village might tell tales of an Oni that blighted crops, while a trading town might fear one that caused market crashes, each community crafting a monster that embodied its unique vulnerabilities. Ultimately, the Oni's terrifying appearance is a masterclass in visual storytelling. Every element of their design, from their bestial faces to their non-human anatomy, serves a single purpose: to visually scream danger and other. They are the antithesis of human ideals of beauty and order, making them the perfect vessel for representing everything that threatens a peaceful, civilized life. Whether bright red to ward off evil or corpse blue to invite chills, their look is a large part of their enduring power, an unforgettable image born from 1,000 years of refining our deepest fears into a single, monstrous form. Yet for all their terrifying physicality, an Oni's most iconic and fearsome attribute is often not a part of its own body, but the weapon it wields, the mighty kanabo. This is no ordinary club. It is a massive, studded iron bar, a weapon so heavy and cumbersome that only a being of supernatural strength could possibly lift it, let alone swing it in combat with lethal precision. The very presence of a kanabo in an Oni's grasp is a statement of overwhelming power, a promise of brute force that can shatter armor, crush bone, and destroy any opposition with a single devastating blow. Its design is brutally simple: a long, thick iron shaft, often hexagonal or octagonal, studded with menacing iron knobs or spikes, making it as much a bludgeoning tool as a tearing instrument. In the hands of a human warrior, it would be utterly impractical, a testament to the fact that this weapon was designed for legends and monsters, not for the battlefields of men. The association between the Oni and the kanabo is so strong in Japanese art and folklore that it became a kind of visual shorthand. To depict a demon holding this massive club was to instantly communicate its nature as a being of immense, untamable strength. But this connection runs deeper than mere practicality. The kanabo symbolizes a crucial aspect of the Oni's character: its reliance on pure, brute force over strategy, skill, or finesse. While other yokai might rely on trickery, illusion, or magic, the Oni prefers a direct, overwhelming assault. The kanabo is the perfect embodiment of this philosophy. It is the antithesis of a samurai's elegant katana, which represents discipline, honor, and skill. The club is raw, unchecked power, and its use suggests a being that does not negotiate, does not reason, and cannot be outmatched in a contest of sheer strength. This very reliance on brute force, however, also contains the seed of the Oni's potential downfall, making the kanabo a symbol of ironic weakness within its overwhelming strength. A recurring theme in many folktales is the clever hero who cannot hope to match the Oni's power directly but can outthink it. In these stories, the hero might trick the Oni into smashing its own club against an immovable object, causing it to shatter or become lodged, or use the demon's pride in its strength to lure it into a trap. The kanabo, therefore, becomes a double-edged symbol. It is the source of the Oni's fearsome reputation, but it is also a potential Achilles heel, a manifestation of the arrogance and lack of cunning that often allows a quick-witted human to triumph. The weapon that signifies ultimate power can, in the right narrative, become an instrument of the demon's own defeat, teaching a lesson that brains can indeed overcome brawn. Beyond its narrative role, the kanabo also carries a potent linguistic legacy that echoes through Japanese culture to this day. The phrase "oni ni kanabo," which translates literally to "an iron club for an oni," is a common proverb. It means to give an already powerful thing an even greater advantage, like adding fuel to a fire or, in English terms, giving a giant a giant's weapon. You might use it to describe an unbeatable sports team acquiring the best new player, or a brilliant student getting extra tutoring. It's an expression for a combination of innate power and superior tools that creates an unstoppable force. This everyday saying is a perfect example of how the Oni and its iconic weapon have transcended their mythological origins to become a living part of the language, a metaphor for overwhelming superiority that is instantly understood by everyone. While their roles as hellish jailers and symbols of brute force are foundational, the true depth of the Oni is revealed through the epic tales in which they take center stage. No discussion of these legendary demons would be complete without the story of Shuten Doji, perhaps the most famous oni in all of Japanese mythology, whose legend is a sprawling narrative of terror, power, and ultimate downfall. His name itself, often translated as drunken demon or sake child, hints at his infamous hedonism and immense capacity for alcohol, a vice that would famously contribute to his end. Shuten Doji was no ordinary monster. He was portrayed as the king of all oni, a being of such formidable power that he established his own court of demons on Mount O, northwest of the ancient capital of Kyoto. From his fortified palace, he orchestrated a reign of terror that plagued the land. His primary and most horrifying vice was his appetite for human flesh, particularly that of young noblewomen from the capital. He and his band of demon followers would descend from the mountain to kidnap, kill, and consume their victims, throwing the imperial court into a state of panic and despair. This wasn't random violence, it was a direct challenge to the heart of civilization, a demonic king preying on the most vulnerable members of the aristocracy and defying the authority of the emperor himself. The situation grew so dire that the emperor himself, typically identified as Emperor Akijo, commissioned his most legendary warrior to end the threat, Minamoto no Yorimitsu, also known as Minamoto no Reiko. Yorimitsu was a historical figure, a renowned samurai commander of the Heian period, whose real-life exploits were so celebrated that they were quickly woven into myth. He did not journey alone. He was accompanied by his 4 loyal and equally legendary retainers known as the Shitano, or 4 Heavenly Kings. Together, this band of heroes represented the pinnacle of human courage, skill, and divine favor, the only force capable of standing against the supernatural terror of the Oni King. Understanding that a direct assault on the demon's stronghold would be suicide, Yorimitsu and his men devised a cunning plan. They disguised themselves as Yamabushi mountain ascetics and managed to infiltrate Shuten Doji's lair. The Oni, perhaps amused by these bold priests, invited them inside and even offered them hospitality. In a tense and incredibly risky scene, the heroes sat and drank with the very demon they were sent to kill. Shuten Doji, true to his name, offered them his own powerful sake, a drink so potent it was said to be poisonous to humans. Fortunately, the heroes had come prepared with a divine antidote given to them by the gods, allowing them to drink without succumbing to the poison. They, in turn, offered the Demon King a gift of their own specially prepared sake, a brew laced with a powerful sedative. As Shuten Doji and his demon court drank themselves into a stupor, their supernatural defenses lowered and they fell into a deep, enchanted sleep. The moment of vulnerability had arrived. Shedding their disguises, Yorimitsu and his retainers drew their swords, but they faced a problem. A powerful spell protected the Oni, making him invulnerable to normal steel. Guided by a divine dream, Yorimitsu knew he had to strike with a specific, legendary sword, the Takai Dojijiri Yasutsuna, a blade bestowed upon him by the emperor for this very purpose. With a single, mighty swing, Yorimitsu severed the drunken demon's head. In a final, spectacular display of the Oni's lingering power, the severed head flew through the air, attempting to bite the hero's head, but Yorimitsu, protected by his sturdy helmet, dodged the attack and the demon was finally vanquished. This epic tale of Shuten Doji is far more than a simple monster-slaying story. It is a rich allegory. It represents the triumph of civilization, represented by the cunning and divinely backed imperial forces, over the chaotic, barbaric, and primal forces of the wild, embodied by the monstrous Oni. It reinforces the idea that even the most powerful evil can be overcome by a combination of human bravery, divine assistance, and clever strategy. Beyond the epic battles of legendary heroes, the fear of Oni was deeply woven into the fabric of everyday life, providing a terrifying explanation for the most unpredictable and devastating events, natural disasters. In a world without modern science, a sudden earthquake that shattered homes, a typhoon that flattened crops, or a mysterious plague that swept through a village demanded an explanation. The concept of an invisible, malevolent force was too abstract. People needed a cause they could visualize and, crucially, one they could potentially defend against. The Oni, with its immense physical power and inherent malevolence, became the perfect culprit. It was believed that these demons were the direct agents of such catastrophes, their violent actions manifesting as the very forces of nature itself. An earthquake or Jishin was not merely tectonic plates shifting. It was the result of a giant Jishin no Omicron, or Great Earth Spider, shaking the land. While not always called an Oni explicitly, this entity shared their monstrous, malevolent characteristics. More commonly, the tremors were attributed to a colossal ungeikayo, a giant catfish that lived in the mud beneath the islands of Japan. This catfish was typically restrained by the god Kashima using a powerful keystone. But when the god's vigilance wavered, the catfish would thrash about, causing the ground to heave and split. In many depictions, this catfish was shown with the fierce, horned face of an Oni, blurring the line between animal and demon and solidifying the connection between the supernatural creature and the physical disaster. Storms, plagues, and famines were similarly personified. A devastating hurricane might be the breath of a flying Oni, while a crop blight could be the result of a field being cursed by a passing demon. This anthropomorphizing of disaster served a critical psychological purpose. It transformed an impersonal, random act of nature into a deliberate attack by a conscious being. This was, in a strange way, more comforting than the alternative. If a disaster was caused by an Oni, then it could potentially be stopped, appeased, or scared away through the right rituals and charms. It gave people a sense of agency in the face of overwhelming chaos. This belief gave rise to a rich tradition of folk rituals and protective charms designed specifically to ward off these calamity-bringing Oni. The most widespread practice was the custom of mamori, or protective amulets. Households would often place a holly branch with sardine heads attached to their entrance during the Setsubun festival, a time when the boundaries between the spiritual and physical worlds were believed to be thin. The strong, pungent smell of the burning sardine heads and the sharp points of the holly leaves were thought to be so offensive to the senses of an Oni that it would turn away and leave the home untouched by misfortune. Perhaps the most famous and enduring ritual is the springtime tradition of Setsubun, which literally means seasonal division. On this day, which marks the beginning of spring according to the lunar calendar, households throughout Japan perform memmaki, or bean throwing. A family member, often the father, will wear an Oni mask embodying the evil and misfortune of the past year. The rest of the family then pelts this demon with roasted soybeans while shouting, "Oni wa soto." Fuku wa achai, demons out, fortune in. The beans, symbolizing purity and life, are believed to drive out the malevolent forces. Afterward, everyone picks up and eats a number of beans equal to their age +1, ensuring health and good luck for the coming year. This ritual is a perfect example of sympathetic magic, a physical act meant to influence the spiritual world, banishing the abstract concept of misfortune by physically driving out its symbolic representative. Temples and shrines also played a vital role as centers of communal protection. People would purchase ofyuda, sacred paper talismans inscribed with the names of deities or powerful sutras, and place them on doorposts above entryways or in family altars to create a spiritual barrier against Oni and the disasters they brought. Specific gods were invoked for protection against specific threats. Abisu, one of the 7 gods of fortune, was prayed to for safety at sea and protection from storms, while Yakushi Nyorai, the Buddha of healing, was called upon to ward off disease-bearing spirits. These practices reveal a profound and universal human need to find order in chaos and to exert control over the uncontrollable. By giving a face and a name to the forces of destruction, the Oni, the people of ancient Japan created a framework for understanding their world. They developed a cultural toolkit of rituals, charms, and prayers that transformed passive fear into active defense. This wasn't just superstition. It was a sophisticated system of crisis management and community cohesion. In the face of a looming storm or the first tremors of an earthquake, the entire community could rally around a shared set of actions, strengthening social bonds and providing much-needed comfort through collective action. The demon was not just a source of fear, but also a catalyst for the rituals that helped society endure. Beyond their roles as bringers of disaster, Oni became central characters in the rich oral tradition of Japanese folktales, or mukoshibanashi. These stories, passed down through generations around the hearth, often used the Oni as a classic antagonist, a formidable obstacle for the hero to overcome. Yet, even here, their portrayal isn't entirely one-dimensional. They occasionally reveal surprising layers, shifting from pure evil to being outsmarted in humorous ways, showcasing a different facet of their mythological role. One of the most beloved and iconic of these tales is the story of Momotaro, the Peach Boy. This narrative is a quintessential example of the Oni as a collective villain that must be expelled from the community. The story begins with an old, childless woman discovering a giant peach floating down a river. Inside, she finds a baby boy whom she and her husband raise as their own. Momotaro grows into a strong and courageous young man and decides to embark on a journey to Onigashima Demon Island to confront the Oni who have been terrorizing the land, stealing treasure, and causing hardship for the people. His quest is a classic hero's journey. On his way, he meets 3 animal allies, a dog, a monkey, and a pheasant. By offering them portions of his special kibai dango millet dumplings, he earns their loyalty and friendship. This band of companions, each bringing their unique abilities, the dog's fierceness, the monkey's agility, and the pheasant's aerial perspective sails to the demon fortress. There, they launch a coordinated attack. The heroes battle the Oni, who are defeated not just by strength but by teamwork and strategy. Momotaro and his allies triumph, binding the Oni leader and forcing the demons to surrender their stolen plunder. The story ends with the heroes returning home as celebrated liberators, restoring peace and prosperity to the community. Momotaro is far more than a simple adventure, it is a powerful allegory. The Oni represent an external threat, often interpreted as foreign invaders or pirates who plague the Japanese coast. Momotaro, born from a peach symbolizing longevity and vitality, embodies the spirit of the nation itself, young, righteous, and destined for greatness. His animal allies represent the unity of the people, different groups coming together under a common cause to defeat a powerful enemy. The tale reinforces core societal values of bravery, cooperation, and the inevitable victory of good, community, and clever planning over isolated, brute evil. While Momotaro presents the Oni as a straightforward menace, other folktales explore their character with a lighter, more comedic touch, revealing that even these terrifying demons could be made foolish. A wonderful example of this is the story known as Oni no Shodoku, or the Oni's Laughter. In this tale, a kind but simple old man is chopping wood in the mountains when he is discovered by a group of Oni. Instead of attacking him immediately, the demons find him amusing and decide to keep him as a pet or a servant. They force him to perform tasks for them. The old man, though frightened, maintains his gentle nature. One day, while working, he accidentally cuts his hand and begins to bleed. To stop the bleeding, he grabs a nearby fallen leaf and presses it against the cut. To his amazement, the leaf has magical properties that instantly heal the wound. He realizes he has discovered a sangu, a wound-sealing leaf. The Oni witness this and are utterly fascinated. They demand he demonstrate this trick again. Eager to please his captors and avoid harm, the old man playfully pretends to cut his own throat and then heals it with the leaf. The Oni, believing this to be a fantastic game, all try to imitate him. They actually cut their own throats, expecting to easily heal themselves, and instead perish from their own foolishness. The old man escapes safe and sound. This story brilliantly subverts the typical power dynamic. The Oni, for all their strength, are portrayed as gullible, childish, and easily deceived by a simple trick. Their downfall comes from a combination of their own curiosity and a lack of critical thinking, a stark contrast to their image as hellish punishers. Tales like these served an important purpose. They made the concept of the Oni less absolutely terrifying. By showing that they could be outwitted by a clever commoner, these stories gave people a sense of empowerment. They taught that intelligence and composure could be a more effective weapon against overwhelming power than direct confrontation, a comforting lesson for ordinary people facing the many hardships of life. These folk tales, from the epic to the humorous, ensured the Oni remained a vibrant and relatable figure in the everyday culture of Japan. They were not just distant concepts from religious scrolls. They were the villains in the stories told to children, the embodiment of challenges that could be overcome with courage, unity, and wit. This narrative tradition cemented the Oni's place in the popular imagination, making them a versatile symbol that could represent everything from a monstrous foreign threat to a foolish bully who gets his comeuppance. While we often picture Oni as brutish giants wielding massive clubs, their true danger often lies not in raw strength, but in a far more insidious talent, the art of deception. Beyond their terrifying true forms, many Oni are also legendary shapeshifters, masters of illusion who can cloak their monstrous nature in a convincing disguise. This ability to transform into a beautiful woman, a trusted priest, or even a harmless animal makes them infinitely more perilous, as their evil can walk undetected right into the heart of a village or home. This cunning aspect adds a thrilling layer of psychological terror to their mythology, forcing characters, and by extension the audience, to question appearances and trust no one. A classic tale that showcases this treacherous cunning is the story of the Kubai Kiri Nuke, or the head-cutting escape. In this legend, an Oni transforms itself into a captivatingly beautiful woman and positions herself by a remote mountain path, pretending to weep pitifully. When a kind-hearted samurai traveling alone comes upon her, she spins a sorrowful tale of being lost and in danger. Moved by her distress and beauty, the samurai offers to escort her to safety. As they walk, she gradually maneuvers behind him. The moment his guard is down, her beautiful form melts away, revealing her true demonic visage. She then uses her sharp, claw-like fingernails to attempt to sever the samurai's head in a single, swift motion. This story is a chilling cautionary tale about the dangers of trusting strangers and the deadly consequences of being lured in by a pleasing appearance, a metaphor for how evil often hides its true intentions behind an attractive mask. Perhaps the most famous narrative exploring this theme is the timeless folktale of Kachai Kachai Yama, or Firecrackle Mountain. In this story, a wicked tanuki, a raccoon dog with shape-shifting abilities, brutally murders an old woman and then takes on her form to trick her husband. The tanuki, disguised as the wife, cooks a grotesque meal from her remains and serves it to the unsuspecting old man. When the tanuki reveals its cruel trick, it is eventually captured by the old man. The tanuki's punishment is to be forced to perform back-breaking labor. To escape, the tanuki once again uses its shape-shifting prowess, this time transforming into a terrifying Oni to frighten its captors. This layering of transformations from animal to human to demon highlights how the line between different yokai could blur, and it cemented the idea that the Oni form was the ultimate embodiment of terror, a disguise so frightening it could break at NY Chinese letter. But the motif of the deceptive Oni isn't confined to standalone folktales. It appears in some of the most revered collections of Buddhist moral stories. In the Konjoku Monogatari Rishu, a massive anthology of tales from India, China, and Japan, there is a story of an Oni that transforms into a beloved family member who had recently passed away. Appearing at the home of the grieving relatives, the demon wears the face and voice of the deceased perfectly, exploiting their emotional vulnerability and love to gain entry. Once welcomed inside and offered comfort, the creature eventually reveals its horrific true nature, attacking the family it had just deceived. This story served a dual purpose. It was a terrifying ghost story, but it also carried a deeper Buddhist lesson about the perils of attachment. The grief and desire to see a lost loved one again created an opening for a malevolent force to enter, teaching that true spiritual danger often preys on human weakness and unchecked emotion. This capacity for trickery fundamentally changes how we understand the Oni. It proves they are not mere mindless forces of destruction. They are intelligent, strategic, and psychologically astute predators. They understand human nature intimately, our capacity for pity, our physical desires, our grief, and they weaponize these very emotions against us. A demon that can only smash down your door is frightening, but a demon that can convince you to invite it inside for tea is utterly terrifying. This shape-shifting ability transforms them from an external physical threat into an internal, psychological one, blurring the lines between the monster outside and the vulnerabilities within. This incredible diversity in Oni mythology becomes even more fascinating when we travel beyond the Central Islands and explore how these demons were imagined in Japan's far-flung regions. The core concept of a powerful, often malevolent supernatural being was a constant, but its form, behavior, and even its purpose were beautifully molded by local geography, history, and unique spiritual beliefs. The Oni of the snowy north told a very different story from those of the tropical southern islands. In the Tohoku region of northern Honshu, a land of long, harsh winters and remote mountain villages, the most famous yokai is the Namahage of Akita Prefecture. While not always explicitly called Oni, they share every single characteristic. They are large, terrifying, horned figures clad in straw raincoats and wielding enormous daba knives. Their name is thought to come from namomi, the blisters you get from sitting too long by the fire, and hogu, to peel off. On New Year's Eve, teams of men dressed as these demons go from house to house, stomping through snowdrifts, roaring, and demanding to know if there are any lazy children or negligent wives inside. They are the embodiment of a harsh but necessary lesson. Their terrifying performance serves a vital communal function, to scare youngsters into being obedient and hardworking, and to ensure that everyone contributes to the household during the difficult winter months. After their display, they are offered sake and mochai, transforming from punishers into protective, albeit frightening, bringers of good fortune for the year ahead. The Namahage are a perfect example of an Oni-like figure that is not purely evil, but rather a disciplinary force that reinforces social order and preparedness against the brutal elements. Travel southwest to the island of Shikoku, and we encounter a demon deeply tied to one of Japan's most famous pilgrimages. In Ehime Prefecture, the story of the Iya Valley Oni tells of a band of defeated Terra clan warriors who, according to legend, fled to this remote, mountainous region after the Genpei War. To hide from their pursuers, they twisted the local folklore, spreading tales that the valley was inhabited by fierce, monstrous Oni. They even built the Peering Iya Valley Scarecrow Village to make it appear populated by these creatures, successfully keeping outsiders away for centuries. Here, the Oni myth was actively cultivated by humans as a tool for survival and isolation. The demons were a story weaponized to create a safe haven, their fearsome reputation serving as a protective barrier around a community in hiding. The cultural journey takes its most dramatic turn when we reach the Ryukyu Islands, Okinawa. Here, the indigenous belief system is distinct from mainland Shinto and Buddhism, with a strong focus on ancestor worship and female spiritual mediums known as Noro. In this context, the idea of an Oni transforms into something entirely different, the Shisa. These lion-dog creatures, often seen in pairs guarding rooftops and entrances, are the Ryukyu equivalent of protective demons. One has its mouth open to scare away evil spirits, while the other has its mouth closed to keep good spirits in. They are not beings to be driven out with beans, but revered guardians to be invited onto one's home. This shift from malevolent force to benevolent protector highlights how a culture's fundamental relationship with the spiritual world can completely redefine a mythological concept. Further into Okinawan folklore, we find the Kijimuna, tree sprites often described as small, red-haired beings who live in banyan trees and love fishing. While sometimes mischievous, they are not inherently evil. However, if severely wronged, they can become vengeful and terrifying, a potential for destructive power that echoes the dual nature of many mainland yokai. This demonstrates that even in a culture without the classic horned demon, the underlying concept of a powerful, capricious supernatural entity with the capacity for great harm still exists. It just wears a different face. From the snow country to the coral islands, the story of the Oni is ultimately the story of the people who imagined them. The northern Namahij reflect a society hardening itself against winter's idleness. The Ia Valley Oni reveal a history of conflict and the need for secrecy. The Okinawan Shisa show a culture that seeks harmony and protection from spiritual forces rather than their conquest. These regional variations are not mere quirks of folklore. They are a living map of Japan's diverse cultural landscape, proving that a nation's deepest fears, values, and hopes are always written in the form of its monsters. The artistic depiction of the Oni offers one of the most direct and revealing windows into how these demons were perceived across different eras of Japanese history. Moving beyond the written word, we can turn to the canvases, scrolls, and temple sculptures that have preserved their terrifying image for centuries, each piece a cultural artifact that tells us not just about the monster, but about the people who feared it. One of the most powerful and influential sources for understanding the Oni's role in the spiritual imagination is the genre of art known as Jugoku Zoshi or Hell Scrolls. These are not simple illustrations, they are vast panoramic narratives painted during the late Heian and Kamakura periods, often stretching over 10 meters in length, designed to be slowly unrolled and viewed as a horrifying, immersive journey through the Buddhist realms of punishment. Within these scrolls, the Oni are not random monsters. They are depicted as meticulous, professional tormentors, the dedicated civil servants of damnation. Their faces, painted in stark, terrifying pigments of red and blue, are often contorted in expressions of grim determination or, occasionally, cruel delight as they go about their gruesome work. They operate in teams, using pikes, spears, and their bare hands to enforce a brutal, karmic justice. You might see one group of Oni forcing a greedy soul to swallow molten metal, while another stretches a lyre on a rack to tear them apart. The artists paid incredible attention to the visceral details, the contorted agony of the sinners, the gleaming sweat on the Oni's muscles, the oppressive, fiery landscapes of the hells themselves. These scrolls were not created merely as art, they were powerful tools of religious instruction. Priests would use them during sermons to provide a terrifyingly vivid picture of the consequences of sin, making the abstract concept of bad karma unbearably real for the congregation. The Oni, in this context, become essential enforcers of a moral order, their violence serving a divine, if horrifying, purpose. Beyond the hellscapes, the Oni also became a popular subject in a more narrative form of art called emaki, or picture scrolls, which illustrated famous literary and historical tales. In the Shuten Doji Emaki, we see the legendary demon king not as a faceless force of evil, but as a character with personality and grandeur. He is depicted in his mountain lair, surrounded by his demon court, often shown as a figure of immense power and even a kind of barbaric luxury, drinking sake from a human skull. These scenes build a more complex portrait, showing the Oni as a society unto themselves, with their own hierarchy, customs, and culture. The subsequent scenes of his defeat by Minamoto no Reiko are depicted with dynamic, almost cinematic energy. The heroic samurai's blade a flash of divine order cutting through the chaos of the demon's realm. These narrative scrolls transformed the Oni from a theological concept into a dramatic antagonist, a necessary foe whose defeat affirmed the values of courage, loyalty, and imperial authority. The mask is perhaps the most intimate and interactive form of Oni iconography, used in No and Kyogen theater as well as in local folk rituals and festivals. The Oni mask is a powerful object that allows a human to channel the demon's essence. Carved from wood and painted with dramatic, exaggerated features, bulging eyes, a leering mouth full of fangs, and prominent horns, these masks are designed to be instantly recognizable and emotionally potent. In No plays, an actor wearing an Oni mask might portray a vengeful spirit or a demonic tempter, their performance constrained by the mask's fixed expression, meaning all the emotion and nuance must be conveyed through the slow, deliberate movement of the body. This creates a chilling, otherworldly presence. In contrast, the masks used in village festivals like the Namahij of Akita are meant for active, noisy participation. They are tools for creating communal catharsis, allowing a designated villager to embody the terrifying force that scolds laziness, only to be pacified and transformed into a protective spirit through offerings and ritual. The mask, therefore, demonstrates the Oni's dual nature. It can represent an external evil to be defeated on stage or a necessary, internalized social pressure to be managed within the community. Even in the serene settings of Buddhist temples, the Oni had a place, often serving as protective figures in a surprising symbolic reversal. The most famous example is the pair of Neo statues that often guard the gates of Buddhist temples. These muscular, wrathful deities, usually one with an open mouth and one with a closed mouth, are technically not Oni but benevolent guardians. However, their visual language is borrowed directly from Oni iconography. Their fierce expressions, dynamic poses, and implied immense strength make them look every bit the part of terrifying demons. Their role, however, is to use that fearsome appearance to scare away malevolent spirits and protect the sacred precincts within. This illustrates a profound concept in Japanese spiritual thought, that a fearsome exterior can house a benevolent purpose. The terrifying form is not inherently evil, it is a tool, and in the right context, the image of the Oni itself can be harnessed for protection, showing that true power lies not in the form itself but in the intention behind it. Through these diverse artistic mediums, we see the Oni's image being constantly refined and repurposed. From the detailed torments of the Hell Scrolls to the dramatic narratives of picture scrolls, from the performative power of the theater mask to the protective wrath of temple guardians, artists have used the Oni as a versatile symbol to explore the nature of fear, punishment, power, and even salvation. Each brushstroke and chisel mark reveals less about the demons themselves and more about the society that created them, a society seeking to visualize its deepest anxieties about death and sin, to celebrate its heroic ideals, and to ritualize the constant struggle between the forces of chaos and the fragile order of human civilization. To fully appreciate the role of the Oni, we must zoom out from the islands of Japan and view them within the vast, interconnected tapestry of East Asian cosmology. Their existence as forces of chaos and destruction finds a profound and deliberate counterbalance in one of the region's most foundational mythological systems, the four symbols or shijin. This celestial quartet, Seryu the azure dragon of the east, Suzoku the vermilion bird of the south, Byako the white tiger of the west, and Genbu the black tortoise of the north, were not merely decorative constellations. They were the divine guardians of the four cardinal directions, each ruling over a season and an element, and together they represented the perfect, harmonious order of the cosmos. They were the ultimate symbols of stability, protection, and the benevolent, structured power of the heavens. The Oni occupy the philosophical and spiritual space directly opposed to this celestial harmony. If the four symbols represent the cosmic center, the emperor, the capital city, the established order, and the predictable turning of the seasons, then the Oni are the embodiment of everything that lurks on the dangerous, unpredictable periphery. They are the chaotic forces that constantly test and threaten this divine structure. This isn't a simple battle of good versus evil in a Western sense. It is a perpetual, dynamic tension between order and chaos, structure and entropy, the civilized center and the untamable wild. The Oni are the necessary antagonists that give the harmonious order its meaning and value. Without the ever-present threat of their chaos, the protective power of the four symbols would have no purpose. This conceptual relationship is made stunningly visible in the very architecture and urban planning of ancient Japan, particularly in the former capital of Heian Kyo, modern-day Kyoto. The city was meticulously designed according to the principles of Chinese geomancy, or feng shui, to be a microcosm of the ordered universe. The imperial palace sat at the northern center, protected symbolically by Genbu, the black tortoise. But the most feared direction was the northeast, known as the Kimen, or Demon Gate. This axis was considered a spiritually vulnerable conduit for malevolent forces and misfortune to flow into the city. It was the direction from which Oni and other calamities were believed to emerge. To defend the capital from this metaphysical threat, the city's planners took deliberate action. They strategically placed powerful temples and shrines, such as the renowned Enryoku-ji on Mount Hiei, directly at the northeastern gate. These sacred sites acted as spiritual fortresses, their collective prayers and divine power forming a barrier against the chaotic energies that sought to disrupt the capital's harmony. In this tangible, geographical sense, the protective influence of the celestial order, channeled through these temples, was in a constant, silent standoff with the potential for Oni-like chaos from the northeast. The demons did not need to physically appear. Their symbolic presence shaped the very landscape of power. This cosmological role also helps explain the frequent association of Oni with specific natural disasters and phenomena. An earthquake wasn't just the work of a giant catfish. It was a violent shudder through the established order, a moment when chaotic forces broke through the cosmic framework. A plague was a manifestation of spiritual pollution spreading through the orderly body of society. The Oni were the personification of these breakdowns. In a system where the four symbols governed the predictable movements of the seasons and stars, the Oni represented the unpredictable, the catastrophic, and the anomalous, all the things that the harmonious cosmic model could not contain. Therefore, the Oni are not outside the cosmic order. They are an essential part of its balance. They are the void that gives form to the solid, the darkness that defines the light. Their constant threat is what necessitates the vigilant protection of the Shijin and the countless rituals humans perform to maintain spiritual hygiene. In the grand scheme of East Asian mythology, the Oni are the indispensable force of chaos that makes the concept of cosmic order not just a beautiful idea, but a necessary fortress that must be continually defended. They remind us that harmony is not a default state but a fragile achievement, always under siege from the tumultuous, untamable wilderness that lies just beyond the city walls and the edges of the known world. While their artistic and cosmological roles are profound, the Oni truly comes to life in the most vibrant and participatory way possible, through Japan's annual festivals. Here, these formidable demons step out of scrolls and stories and into the streets, becoming central characters in living rituals that unite entire communities. The most famous of these events is undoubtedly Setsubun, a festival that transforms the abstract concept of driving out evil into a loud, joyful, and deeply symbolic family activity. Held on February 3rd or 4th, marking the day before the beginning of spring according to the traditional lunar calendar, Setsubun is rooted in the ancient belief that seasonal turning points are times when the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds grows thin, allowing malevolent forces to cross over more easily. The primary ritual of Setsubun is meme-maki, or bean throwing. In homes across Japan, a family member, often the father, will don a terrifying but often comical oni mask, physically embodying all the misfortune and evil of the past year. The rest of the family then pelts this demon with roasted soybeans, shouting the phrase, "Oni wa soto, fuku wa achai," which means demons out, fortune in. This isn't just a game, it's a powerful act of sympathetic magic. The beans themselves are symbolic, representing purity and life due to their use as a sacred offering in Shinto rituals. By hurling these pure, life-giving objects at the symbol of evil, participants believe they are literally purging their homes of negative spiritual influences. The ritual culminates in everyone eating a number of beans equal to their age plus one, a practice meant to internalize that purity and ensure health and good luck for the coming year. This entire ceremony is a beautiful example of how a culture visualizes and actively manages intangible fears, turning anxiety about the future into a proactive, family-centered celebration. Setsubun is also celebrated on a grand scale at temples and shrines across the country, where the event takes on an even more spectacular form. At locations like Kyoto's Yoshida Shrine or Tokyo's Senso-ji, celebrities, sumo wrestlers, and local dignitaries are invited to serve as Toshiotoko, or Lucky Men of the Year, who throw not just beans but also bundled treats, snacks, and sometimes even envelopes with money or vouchers into ecstatic, cheering crowds. The atmosphere is less one of solemn ritual and more of a vibrant, chaotic party, yet the core purpose remains. The act of catching these thrown items is believed to bring the catcher good fortune, directly linking the expulsion of the oni evil with the active invitation of prosperity. These large-scale events demonstrate how a folk tradition can evolve into a major public spectacle while still retaining its essential spiritual meaning. Beyond Setsubun, the oni appears as a central figure in numerous other regional festivals, each with its own unique twist on the demon's role. One of the most dramatic is the Namahage-Sido festival in Oga, Akita Prefecture. Here, the oni-like Namahage, horned and clad in straw capes and masks, descend from the mountains after dark, carrying daban knives and visiting homes. They stomp through the snow, roaring and demanding to know if there are any lazy children or crying babies inside. This terrifying performance is not meant to simply frighten but to chastise and motivate. It serves a vital social function, reinforcing the values of hard work and familial responsibility, especially during the long, idle winter months. After their display, the Namahage are offered sake and mochai by the head of the household, a gesture that transforms them from punishers into protective deities who bestow blessings for a healthy and productive year. The festival perfectly illustrates the Oni's dual nature. They are beings that must be confronted and pacified to convert their raw, chaotic energy into a protective force for the community. Another fascinating example is the Oni Odori, or demon dances, performed in various parts of Japan, such as in the town of Muekeichi in Yamaguchi Prefecture. During these dances, performers wearing elaborate Oni masks and costumes move in slow, powerful, and often hypnotic rhythms. Unlike the chaotic bean throwing of Setsubun or the aggressive door-to-door visits of the Namahage, the Oni Odori is a more solemn and ritualized performance. The dances are often intended to pray for a good harvest, to ward off epidemics, or to appease the spirits of the dead. The Oni here are not being driven out. They are being summoned and placated through performance, their power acknowledged and redirected through respectful ceremony. This shows a very different relationship with the demonic, one based on negotiation and respect rather than outright expulsion. Through these festivals, the Oni is demystified and brought into the fold of community life. They become a shared cultural language for dealing with universal human concerns, the fear of misfortune, the desire for health, and the hope for prosperity. The rituals provide a prescribed, collective way to manage these anxieties, transforming passive worry into active, communal participation. Whether being pelted with beans on a doorstep, offered sake in a snowy village, or summoned through a rhythmic dance, the Oni is never a distant monster in these contexts. It is an intimate, though formidable, part of the annual cycle, a necessary character in the ongoing story a community tells itself about overcoming challenges and inviting good fortune. This vibrant festival life ensures the Oni remains not a relic of the past, but a living, breathing, and ever-evolving symbol in the heart of Japanese culture. But the legacy of the Oni is far from confined to ancient scrolls and seasonal rituals. These formidable demons have successfully stormed the gates of modern pop culture, finding a powerful new lease on life in anime, manga, video games, and film. This transition from folkloric archetype to contemporary icon isn't just a simple retelling of old stories. It's a dynamic process of reinvention where the core essence of the Oni is constantly adapted, deconstructed, and reimagined for new audiences and new anxieties. Modern media doesn't merely preserve the mythology, it actively contributes to it, ensuring the Oni remains a relevant and evolving symbol in the global imagination. One of the most significant bridges between traditional folklore and modern anime is the legendary series GGG no Kitaro, created by the late manga artist Shigeru Mizuki. Debuting in the 1960s and enjoying numerous revivals over the decades, this franchise serves as a veritable encyclopedia of yokai, with the Oni playing a prominent and varied role. The series often features classic club-wielding Oni as antagonists, but it also explores their more complex societal structures, portraying them as a species with their own cultures, conflicts, and even occasional alliances with the hero Kitaro. This approach did something revolutionary. It presented yokai, including Oni, not just as monsters to be defeated, but as a hidden society coexisting with humanity, often reflecting very human concerns about environmental destruction, urbanization, and fading traditions. By giving these demons personalities, motivations, and even a sense of humor, GGG no Kitaro made the entire world of Japanese folklore accessible and endlessly fascinating to generations of children, ensuring these ancient tales were passed down not as dusty lessons but as thrilling adventures. The realm of video games has proven to be an exceptionally fertile ground for the Oni, leveraging their imposing physique and fearsome reputation to create memorable antagonists and even playable characters. The fighting game genre, in particular, embraces the Oni's raw power. In the Street Fighter series, the character Akuma, whose name literally means devil or demon, is the ultimate embodiment of the Satsui no Hado, the surge of murderous intent. While not a traditional Oni in appearance, he channels their essence, a being of pure, overwhelming martial power who has rejected his humanity to pursue strength alone. More directly, the Dead or Alive series features Bankatsubo, a massive, horned boss character explicitly designed as a classic Oni, complete with terrifying strength and a moveset that feels brutally unstoppable. These games tap into the Oni's foundational symbolism as the ultimate test of strength and skill, a final boss that represents a peak of challenge that only the most dedicated players can overcome. Perhaps the most nuanced and celebrated modern interpretation comes from the beloved video game series Okami. Here, the Oni are reimagined as the primary foot soldiers of the game's main antagonist, the eight-headed serpent Orochi. These demons are depicted as hulking, red-skinned brutes that spread corruption and darkness across the land, perfectly aligning with their traditional role as bringers of calamity. Yet, Okami also brilliantly integrates the Oni into its core mechanic of restoration. The player, as the sun goddess Amaterasu, must use the celestial brush to purge the land of this demonic influence, literally painting over the darkness to restore color and life. This interactive metaphor beautifully mirrors the traditional rituals of Setsubun, transforming the act of driving out evil into the central, playful mechanic of the game. It makes the player an active participant in this ancient struggle, connecting them to the cultural practice in a deeply engaging way. In cinema, the Oni continues to be a potent source of horror, but modern films often explore the psychological terror they represent rather than just their physical threat. While many Western adaptations might simplify them into generic ghosts, Japanese horror films frequently delve into the more unsettling aspects of their mythology, their shape-shifting deception, and their role as karmic punishers. A film might feature an Oni not as a monster that jumps out of the shadows, but as a relentless force that haunts a guilty protagonist, a manifestation of a past sin that simply cannot be outrun. This modern take connects back to their Buddhist roots, where the demon you face is often the one you have created through your own actions. Furthermore, global blockbusters like the Harry Potter franchise have introduced the Oni to worldwide audiences, albeit in an adapted form, as seen with the Japanese magical school Mahotakoro and its surrounding lore. This cross-cultural pollination ensures the Oni's image continues to evolve, taking on new meanings as it encounters different storytelling traditions. Through these countless appearances, the Oni has been successfully translated for the modern era. Its role has expanded from a folktale villain to a versatile narrative device. It can be a straightforward symbol of overpowering challenge in a game, a complex metaphor for internalized guilt in a film, or a familiar, almost nostalgic figure in a children's cartoon. This incredible adaptability is the key to its enduring appeal. Modern media keeps the mythology alive not by treating the Oni as a museum piece, but by continually finding new relevance in its ancient power. It asks new questions. What does a demon represent in a digital age? Is chaos a force to be defeated, or an inevitable part of a system? By wrestling with these ideas through the potent image of the Oni, contemporary storytellers are doing what humanity has always done, using the monster to understand ourselves. Yet to truly grasp the enduring power of the Oni, we must journey inward into the realm of the human psyche itself. For these demons are far more than external monsters. They are profound mirrors reflecting our deepest internal landscapes, our fears, our repressed desires, and the shadow selves we try to keep hidden. In this light, the Oni becomes one of the world's most potent psychological metaphors, a symbolic vessel for the chaos that resides not in the mountains or hells but within us. They give a fearsome face to the abstract concept of our inner demons, making the intangible struggle of the human condition something tangible that can be confronted, understood, and even overcome. On a deeply personal level, an Oni can be seen as the physical manifestation of a person's own negative karma and harmful impulses. In the Buddhist context we explored earlier, the demon that torments a sinful soul in hell is not merely an external punisher. It is the ultimate embodiment of the hatred, greed, and ignorance that individual nurtured during their lifetime. The claws that tear and the club that crushes are karmic consequences made terrifyingly real. This translates seamlessly into a modern psychological framework. The Oni we fear encountering can represent the overwhelming weight of our own guilt, the addictive behaviors we cannot control, or the volcanic anger we struggle to contain. It is the part of the self that feels monstrous, alien, and separate from who we aspire to be. By projecting these difficult emotions onto a mythological creature, stories provide a safe space to explore these dark facets of our nature. The heroic act of defeating an Oni in a folktale becomes a powerful allegory for the hard-won victory of self-mastery, of integrating one's shadow and achieving a more whole, conscious state of being. This symbolism extends beyond the individual to encompass the collective anxieties of an entire society. Throughout Japanese history, the image of the Oni has been repeatedly weaponized to represent the ultimate other, whatever group or force was perceived as a threat to the social order. In the ancient chronicles, they were the indigenous Amishi people of the north, their resistance to the imperial court recast as monstrous savagery. Later, they could symbolize foreign invaders, political rivals, or even the devastating spread of epidemic diseases. The demon is a cultural scapegoat, a way for a community to externalize a complex, frightening problem into a single, defeatable enemy. The triumphant narrative of Momotaro rallying allies to storm Demon Island is not just a children's story. It is a myth that reinforces social cohesion, defining the boundaries of the community by creating a common adversary to unite against. The Oni becomes the necessary antagonist that clarifies who we are by showing us what we are not. Furthermore, the Oni brilliantly embodies the universal human fear of chaos and the unpredictable. Their association with natural disasters, earthquakes, storms, and plagues makes them the perfect personification of life's utter lack of control. Before modern science could explain tectonic shifts or viruses, these calamities felt like the deliberate, malicious acts of a conscious, cruel intelligence. Believing a typhoon was the breath of a flying Oni was ultimately less terrifying than accepting it as a random, impersonal act of nature because a demon can potentially be appeased, tricked, or driven away with rituals. This belief system created a framework for action in the face of the incomprehensible, giving people a sense of agency. The frantic bean throwing of Setsubun is a ritualized stand against life's chaos, a way to proclaim that even in the face of immense, unpredictable forces, we can take meaningful action to protect our homes and hearts. Perhaps most intriguing is the Oni's role as a guardian in certain contexts, which reveals a profound understanding of the dual nature of power. The terrifying Neo statues at temple gates use the Oni's fearsome visage not for evil but for protection. This symbolizes a crucial psychological truth that the traits we often fear or reject in ourselves, our aggression, our intensity, our raw power, are not inherently negative. When properly channeled and given a conscious purpose, that very same ferocity can become a formidable force for defense, boundaries, and righteous action. The demon at the gate teaches us that integrating our own inner Oni, rather than simply trying to exile it, can be the source of our greatest strength. It is the energy that allows us to say no, to defend what we love, and to confront life's challenges with unwavering resolve. The monster and the guardian are two sides of the same coin, demonstrating that what makes a force beneficial or destructive is not its intensity, but the intention and awareness behind it. This exploration of the Oni's many faces would be incomplete without examining a fascinating and often overlooked dimension: the profound difference in how male and female demons are portrayed. The classic image of the hulking, club-wielding brute is almost exclusively male, embodying a very specific kind of external physical threat. The female Oni, however, occupies a far more complex and often tragic space in folklore, revealing deep-seated cultural anxieties about women, power, and emotion. Known specifically as Kijo or Oni Baba, which translates to demon woman or ogress, these beings are rarely mindless forces of nature. Their stories are frequently rooted in a specific, heartbreaking grievance that twists their humanity into monstrous rage. Where a male Oni might terrorize a region to satisfy a base appetite for violence or conquest, a Kijo's actions are almost always a direct response to a profound personal betrayal, most often at the hands of a man. Her narrative typically follows a devastating pattern. She begins as a beautiful, intelligent, and often powerful human woman, perhaps a noble lady, a skilled artisan, or a wise spiritual figure. She is then wronged in an unforgivable way. A common catalyst is intense jealousy from a rival, leading to false accusations that destroy her reputation. In other tales, she is brutally abandoned by a faithless lover or husband, or she suffers the ultimate loss of a child. This deep, personal trauma becomes the catalyst for her transformation. Unable to process the overwhelming torrent of grief, humiliation, and rage through human means, her spirit curdles. She retreats from society, often into a remote mountain cave, and allows her negative emotions to fester until they physically warp her, transforming her beauty into a horrifying visage with wild hair, sharp claws, and sometimes horns. Her power then manifests not as brute strength, but as potent magic, illusion, and cunning, which she uses to exact a very specific and personal revenge. A prime example of this archetype is the story of Kurozuka, or Black Mound, a famous no-play and folktale. It tells of a nobleman who seeks shelter for the night at a remote mountain dwelling, where he finds an elegant, elderly woman living alone. She is spinning thread at her loom and reluctantly offers him hospitality, but begs him and his servants not to look into the back room while she is out fetching water. Overcome by curiosity, one of the servants peeks inside and is horrified to find a cave piled high with human bones. The elegant old woman returns, revealing her true form as a terrifying Kijo who has been luring travelers to her lair to devour them. Her monstrous existence is a direct result of her own tragic past, a life of suffering that twisted her into a predator. This story perfectly illustrates the dual nature of the Kijo. She retains the vestiges of her human elegance and skill the spinning, but is ultimately consumed by a monstrous hunger born from pain. This stark contrast in portrayal speaks volumes about historical gender perceptions embedded in Japanese folklore. The male Oni represents an external, societal threat, an invading army, a natural disaster, a challenge to the communal order that must be met with collective strength and heroism. His defeat is a public victory. The female Oni, the Kijo, represents an internal threat born from the private, domestic sphere. Her story is a cautionary tale about the perceived dangers of uncontrolled female emotion, particularly jealousy and vengefulness. A woman's rage, the folklore suggests, when not properly contained by social norms, could fester in isolation and transform into a supernatural evil that threatens the entire social fabric. She is a warning against betraying women and a manifestation of the fear that the victims of the patriarchal system could eventually harness a terrifying power to become avengers. However, to view these stories solely as tools of patriarchal fear would be to miss their nuanced power. In many ways, the Kijo is also a strangely sympathetic and even empowering figure. She is often far more intelligent and complex than her male counterparts. She doesn't just smash things, she plots, she uses magic, she sets intricate traps. Her violence, however horrific, is presented as having a cause, making her more of a tragic villain than a purely evil one. She is a woman who, having been utterly failed by the systems meant to protect her, takes absolute power into her own hands, albeit with monstrous consequences. In a society that valued female submission and quiet endurance, the Kijo is a terrifying but undeniable example of a woman refusing to be passive, refusing to forgive, and wielding her suffering as a weapon. This makes her one of the most psychologically rich and compelling characters in all of Japanese mythology, a dark mirror reflecting the tragic cost of oppression and the terrifying shape of a heartbreak that has nowhere else to go. While the Oni is a uniquely Japanese figure, its core essence, a powerful, often malevolent being that embodies our deepest fears, finds startling echoes in mythological traditions across the globe. Placing the Oni alongside its international counterparts reveals not just shared human anxieties, but also the fascinating cultural nuances that make each demon distinct. One of the most immediate comparisons is to the ogres of Western European folklore. Like the Oni, ogres are typically large, brutish, and cruel creatures with a fearsome appetite, often depicted living in remote, wild places like mountains or forests and menacing human settlements. Both serve as classic big bad antagonists in fairy tales, representing a primal, physical threat that the hero must overcome through courage or cleverness. However, a key difference lies in their symbolism. The European ogre is often a simpler representation of pure, gluttonous savagery. Its threat is largely physical, and its defeat is a straightforward triumph of good over evil. The Oni, by contrast, is deeply entangled with complex spiritual and karmic systems from Buddhism and Shinto. Its role as a punisher in hell or a bringer of natural disaster connects it to a broader cosmic order, making it a symbol of divine retribution and moral consequence, not just a random monster. A more complex and revealing parallel can be drawn with the Rakshasas of Hindu mythology. These shape-shifting demons are masters of illusion and deception, much like the cunning Oni that can transform into a beautiful woman to lure its victims. Both are intelligent, powerful beings who actively oppose the forces of good, often disrupting sacred rituals and preying on the pious. Their shared affinity for magic and trickery sets them apart from the more straightforwardly brutish ogre. Yet their origins and contexts are worlds apart. Rakshasas are often born from the breath of the creator god Brahma while he was asleep, placing them within a specific divine genealogy in a vast cosmic struggle between order and chaos. The Oni's origins are more nebulous and folkloric, evolving from hidden spirits into physical monsters as a way for people to explain suffering and disaster. Furthermore, while both are ultimately antagonistic, some Rakshasas are complex characters who can even become devotees of the gods, showing a potential for nuance that is rarely afforded to the traditionally irredeemable Oni. Venturing into the mythologies of the ancient Near East, we find another compelling figure, the Babylonian Lilitu, who later evolved into the Hebrew Lilith. Like the female Oni or Kijo, Lilith represents a terrifying inversion of the feminine ideal, a powerful, independent, and vengeful spirit who refuses to be subjugated. Both are often associated with storm winds and the night, preying on pregnant women and newborns, embodying ancient fears surrounding childbirth and infant mortality. This connection highlights a tragic cross-cultural pattern, the demonization of powerful, autonomous, or wronged women as monstrous threats to the patriarchal social order. However, Lilith's story is one of primordial rebellion from the very beginning, a first wife who demanded equality. The Kijo's tragedy is that she is made a monster through betrayal and heartbreak. She begins human and is transformed by unbearable grief, making her a more sympathetic, though no less terrifying figure. Even in the frosty realms of Norse mythology, we find a kindred spirit in the Jotun or frost giants. These primordial beings are forces of chaos and destruction, constantly threatening the ordered world of the gods Asgard. Like the Oni who emerge from the wild periphery to threaten the civilized center, the Jotun represent the untamable, destructive power of nature, the crushing ice, the barren rock, the violent storm. Both are immense in size and power, requiring gods or heroes of extraordinary ability to oppose them. The crucial distinction lies in their relationship with the divine. The Jotun are not simply evil, they are a fundamental part of the cosmos, and the gods themselves often intermarry with them or seek their wisdom. The line between god and giant is frequently blurred. For the Oni, the line is much sharper. They are almost universally antagonistic to both the benevolent kami of Shinto and the enlightened figures of Buddhism, firmly positioned on the side of pollution and evil within that spiritual framework. This global tour of terror shows that the human imagination, when confronted with the unknown and the frightening, consistently conjures up similar archetypal figures. The brute, the trickster, the vengeful spirit, these are universal roles that monsters are cast to play. The specific costume each one wears, however, is tailored by its culture. The Oni's red skin, its iron club, its role as a karmic jailer, and its connection to specific seasonal rituals are all details woven from the unique threads of Japanese history, religion, and society. By comparing it to the ogre, the Rakshasa, Lilith, and the Jotun, we don't diminish the Oni's uniqueness, we actually heighten it. We see what it shares with the world, a foundational human fear of powerful, chaotic forces, and we also see what makes it specifically, brilliantly Japanese. These cross-cultural comparisons ultimately teach us that every culture creates the demons it needs. monsters that perfectly embody its particular values, its deepest anxieties, and its unique way of explaining the terrifying and inexplicable parts of existence. This deep-seated fear of the Oni's power, whether as a bringer of calamity or a personal tormentor, naturally compelled people throughout Japanese history to develop a sophisticated arsenal of protective measures. These methods, ranging from simple household charms to elaborate community-wide rituals, form a fascinating system of spiritual defense designed to create boundaries between the human world and the chaotic forces these demons represent. At the heart of this protective tradition lies the concept of harai purification, a fundamental principle in Shinto that seeks to cleanse away spiritual pollution or kege, which is believed to attract malevolent entities like Oni. By maintaining purity in one's person and environment, a person could effectively make themselves invisible or unappealing to these hungry spirits. One of the most common and enduring forms of protection is the ofyuda, a paper or wooden talisman inscribed with the name of a powerful deity or a sacred mantra. These are typically obtained from Shinto shrines or Buddhist temples and are believed to act as a conduit for the god's protective power. Families would carefully place ofyuda above doorways, on support beams, or in the household Shinto altar, the kamidana, creating an invisible barrier that Oni could not cross. The origins of this practice are deeply rooted in the belief that written words, especially the names of gods or sacred texts, possess an inherent spiritual power. For example, an ofyuda from Fushimi Inari Shrine might feature the name of the rice goddess Inari, invoking her bounty to ward off the poverty and hunger that Oni could symbolize. Similarly, a Buddhist ofyuda might contain a phrase from the Lotus Sutra, its sacred syllables forming a wall of divine sound against evil. The effectiveness was believed to be absolute, provided the talisman was treated with respect and replaced annually during a special purification ritual to renew its spiritual charge. Beyond written talismans, the natural world itself offered a pharmacy of protective elements. Certain plants and foods were thought to possess purifying properties that were particularly offensive to the highly sensitive noses of Oni. The most famous of these is the humble soybean. During the Setsubun festival, the act of throwing roasted soybeans memmaki is preceded by a ritual where the beans are consecrated, transforming them from simple food into vessels of pure life force. The act of throwing them is a symbolic purification of the home, with each bean striking the ground representing the driving out of a single misfortune. The sharp, prickly leaves of the holly tree hirogi and the potent, pungent smell of burning sardine heads iwashi no atama were also combined into a powerful charm. Families would place a holly branch with a sardine head skewered on it at the entrance to their home. The rationale was twofold. The Oni, with its sensitive nature, would be repelled by the foul odor, while the sharp points of the holly leaves would painfully dissuade it from trying to enter. This practice, though less common today, showcases the pragmatic and sensory-based approach to spiritual defense. The rituals themselves often involve the entire community, transforming private fear into public catharsis. Beyond the famous Setsubun, villages would hold annual exorcisms known as Oni-yarai demon driving or Mushusai communal rites. In these events, a Shinto priest or a designated village representative would lead a procession through the streets, chanting prayers, ringing bells, and beating drums to create a wall of purifying sound. The procession would stop at every home, symbolically sweeping out evil influences with sacred branches and bestowing new ofyuda. This served not only a spiritual purpose but also a social one, reinforcing community bonds and providing a shared sense of security against the unknown. The origin of these communal rites likely stems from ancient agricultural traditions aimed at purifying the village at the start of the planting season to ensure a good harvest, protecting the community from the Oni of blight and famine. In the modern era, while belief in literal Oni may have waned, these protective practices endure, evolving to guard against more abstract modern anxieties. People still purchase charming omamori amulets for traffic safety or academic success from shrines, which are direct descendants of the ancient Offuda. The ritual of Setsubun remains wildly popular, not just as a cultural curiosity, but as a fun, meaningful way for families to participate in a tradition that metaphorically cleanses the home and invites good fortune for the year ahead. The methods have adapted. You might now see a celebrity throwing packaged snacks from a temple stage instead of a priest scattering beans, but the core intention remains unchanged. This enduring appeal reveals a universal human truth. Whether facing a mythical demon or the stresses of daily life, the act of taking proactive, symbolic steps to protect what we value provides a profound sense of comfort and control, turning ancient fear into a continuous thread of cultural resilience. But where do these formidable beings reside when they are not tormenting souls or terrorizing villages? The realms of the Oni are as varied and complex as their forms, existing in liminal spaces just beyond the periphery of human perception. Unlike the clearly defined heavens of some traditions, the domains of the Oni are often wild, untamable, and deeply intertwined with the most remote and awe-inspiring landscapes of Japan itself. The most common habitation for these demons is the deep, inaccessible mountain wilderness. In the folk imagination, ranges like the Yoshino Mountains or the peak of Mount O were not just geographical features. They were veritable nations of monsters, places where the normal rules of society ceased to apply and the authority of the Oni reigned supreme. These high-altitude fortresses were perfect symbols of their nature, isolated, forbidding, and looming over human settlements as a constant, visible reminder of the untamed chaos that surrounded the fragile pockets of civilization. To venture into these mountains alone, especially at night, was to risk straying across an invisible border into the Oni's sovereign territory, from which few returned unchanged if they returned at all. Another profound dwelling place for the Oni is the myriad Buddhist hells known collectively as Jugoku. This is not a single location but a vast, bureaucratic complex of realms, each meticulously designed for the punishment of specific sins. Here, the Oni are not independent rulers but functionaries, the brutal enforcers of karmic law employed by the judges of the underworld. Their habitat in this context is a nightmarish landscape of fire, ice, and torture devices, a realm of relentless suffering from which there is no escape for the condemned souls trapped within. This conception places the Oni's home within a highly structured spiritual cosmology, making them an integral part of the universe's moral machinery. Their domain is one of absolute, unforgiving justice, a necessary counterbalance to the realms of enlightenment and a stark warning of the ultimate consequence of a life led astray. Beyond the physical mountains and the theological hells, Oni are also said to inhabit what can best be described as hidden or parallel realms, pockets of reality that exist alongside our own but are normally invisible. These could be enchanted valleys shrouded in perpetual mist, isolated islands that appear on no map, or deep cave systems that descend into the very bowels of the earth. These hidden realms are accessible only through specific, often accidental means. A traveler might follow a path they have walked 100 times only to find it suddenly leads somewhere entirely new and terrifying. A fisherman might be caught in an unnatural squall and washed ashore on a beach of black sand, facing a forest of twisted trees. These spaces operate on their own logic and flow of time, and to enter one is to be subject to the rules and whims of the Oni who dwell there. The most famous of these is undoubtedly Onigashima, or Demon Island, the fortified home of the Oni king Shuten Doji and his legions, a place that exists simultaneously as a real geographical possibility and a metaphor for the ultimate, unreachable stronghold of evil. So how does an ordinary human cross the threshold into these terrifying domains? The pathways are rarely sought after. More often, they are stumbled upon through dreams, misfortune, or a momentary thinning of the veil between worlds. One of the most common portals is the dream state, In Japanese folklore, dreams are not merely neural firings but can be actual journeys of the soul. A particularly vivid or troubling dream could be interpreted as the soul temporarily wandering into a dangerous spiritual plane where it might be captured or tormented by oni. Waking from such a nightmare feeling drained or ill was a sign that the encounter had a real spiritual consequence. This belief blurs the line between the psychological and the supernatural, treating the landscape of the mind as a very real territory where one could indeed meet a demon. Accidental journeys form another classic pathway. This often involves a person becoming hopelessly lost, a state that in itself was considered spiritually vulnerable. A woodcutter who ventures too deep into the forest as dusk falls, a child who chases a beautiful butterfly off the familiar path, or a merchant who takes a wrong turn in a mountain pass, all could inadvertently cross into an Oni's realm. These stories serve as potent cautionary tales about the dangers of straying from the known and the safe, both literally and metaphorically. The moment of transition is often marked by a sudden silence in the forest, an unnatural chill in the air, or the appearance of a mysterious and perhaps too helpful guide who leads the traveler further astray. Once inside, the rules of reality shift. Time may distort with a single night lasting what feels like years, or the geography may become impossible, with paths looping back on themselves to prevent escape. Perhaps the most chilling encounters occur when the Oni decide to cross into our world, bringing their realm with them. This could happen during times of year when the boundary between worlds is thin, such as the end of summer during the Obon festival or the seasonal turning point of Setsubun. An Oni might manifest during a violent storm, its roar indistinguishable from the thunder, or emerge from the earth itself following an earthquake, making the very ground beneath one's feet feel hostile and invaded. These incursions reinforce the idea that the Oni's habitat is not always a distant land. It is a potentiality that can erupt into the human world at any moment, a terrifying reminder that the border between order and chaos is never permanently secure. The journey of the Oni through Japanese history is a captivating story of transformation, a testament to how a culture's monsters evolved to reflect its changing fears, beliefs, and social landscape. From their shadowy beginnings as unseen spirits to their current status as pop culture icons, the image and role of the Oni have been in a constant state of flux, shaped powerfully by the twin forces of religion and popular storytelling. In the earliest layers of Japanese mythology, as seen in the Kojiki and Nihon Shoki, the Oni was not yet the horned, club-wielding brute we picture today. It was a more ambiguous and spectral threat, often referred to as a mono no ki, a malevolent spirit that caused possession, illness, and unexplained misfortune. This conceptual Oni was an invisible force, its name derived from the word meaning to hide or to conceal. It was the terrifying explanation for sudden strokes, fevers, and personal tragedies, a hidden predator in a world filled with unseen dangers. This form was deeply intertwined with early Shinto beliefs, where spiritual pollution kegare could attract all manner of malign influences. The Oni was the ultimate manifestation of this pollution, a consequence of violating taboos or encountering death. The arrival and integration of Buddhism from China and Korea around the 6th century catalyzed the most profound shift in the Oni's identity. Buddhist cosmology provided a ready-made and highly structured universe, complete with multiple hells and a detailed system of karmic retribution. The indigenous Japanese concept of the malevolent spirit found a perfect and terrifying new vocation within this system. The Oni was recruited to serve as the primary jailer and torturer in these Buddhist hells. This theological import gave the Oni a clear moral purpose. It became an enforcer of divine justice, meting out gruesome, eternal punishments to sinful souls. This role fundamentally altered its perception from a random, chaotic evil to an agent of a brutal cosmic order. Art from this period, particularly the terrifying hell scrolls Jugoku Zoshi, depicts these oni not as mindless brutes but as focused, professional tormentors, their terrifying visages serving as a potent tool for priests to illustrate the dire consequences of an unvirtuous life. As the Oni's spiritual role solidified, its physical form began to crystallize in the public imagination. The need to visualize an abstract evil gave rise to the now iconic Chinese letter, the vibrant red or blue skin, the wild hair, the sharp fangs, and the mighty horns. This process of physical definition was heavily influenced by the visual language of Buddhist art, which depicted wrathful protector deities with similar fearsome features. The Oni's signature weapon, the kanabo iron club, also emerged during this time, symbolizing its reliance on overwhelming brute force. This shift from an invisible spirit to a tangible monster was crucial. It made the threat knowable and therefore potentially manageable. If an Oni had a body, it could be outwitted, driven away, or even defeated by a heroic figure. The medieval period saw the Oni become a staple character in secular literature and folktales Mukushibanashi, where its role expanded once again. In epic stories like the tale of Shuten Doji, the Oni was elevated to the status of a narrative antagonist, a powerful king of demons whose defeat required the cunning and bravery of a legendary hero like Minamoto no Reiko. These stories often served as political allegories, with the Oni representing rebellious forces or foreign threats that challenged the central imperial authority. Simultaneously, in folk tales told among common people, the Oni took on a more relatable and sometimes even comical role. Stories like The Oni's Laughter showed them as gullible and easily tricked, able to be outsmarted by a quick-witted farmer or a clever old woman. This duality revealed the Oni's versatility. It could be both an epic symbol of ultimate evil and a familiar folktale bully, reflecting the different needs of courtly literature and village storytelling. The social upheavals of the Edo period further democratized the Oni, integrating it into urban culture and festival life. With a rise in literacy and a booming merchant class, woodblock prints ukiyo-e often featured Oni in dramatic or humorous scenes, making their image widely recognizable to the common public. It was during this era that the festival of Setsubun, with its bean-throwing and demon-driving rituals, became a widespread and standardized annual practice. The Oni was no longer just a monster from the mountains or hell. It was a seasonal inconvenience that every household could actively participate in expelling, reinforcing community bonds and a shared sense of security. In the modern and postmodern eras, the Oni has undergone its most recent and rapid evolution, seamlessly transitioning into global popular culture. No longer confined to religious texts or local folklore, the Oni has been enthusiastically adopted by the engines of anime, manga, and video games. In series like GGG no Kitaro, the Oni is presented as part of a complex yokai society with its own culture, making it an object of fascination rather than pure fear. In games like Okami, the player actively purges the demonic influence from the land, interactively engaging with the ancient concept of driving out evil. This modern reinterpretation often focuses on the Oni's raw power, making it a popular boss character or a symbol of untamable strength. The reason for the Oni's enduring relevance lies in its incredible symbolic flexibility. It is a vessel into which every generation can pour its anxieties. In ancient times, it was the spirit of disease and misfortune. In the medieval period, it was the threat of social disorder and divine punishment. Today, it can represent anything from the stresses of modern life, which we symbolically throw beans at during Setsubun, to the internal struggles with our own personal demons, a metaphor for addiction, anger, or depression. The Oni persists because it is more than a monster. It is a fundamental part of Japan's cultural vocabulary, a powerful and adaptable symbol for the external and internal chaos that humanity has always sought to understand, confront, and ultimately control. Far from being figures to be hidden away, Oni have found a vital and surprisingly wholesome role in modern Japanese childhood, serving as memorable and effective teachers of moral and social values. In contemporary children's media, these formidable demons are often repurposed not to terrify, but to instruct, transforming ancient folklore into engaging lessons about sharing, perseverance, and kindness. This repackaging of the Oni makes abstract concepts like greed or laziness tangible for a young audience. A child can easily grasp the consequence of selfishness when it's embodied by a scowling, red-faced demon having a tantrum over a stolen treat, rather than as a complex philosophical idea. Take, for instance, the beloved character Anpanman, one of Japan's most iconic superheroes for the preschool set. In his world, the primary antagonist is often Baconman or Germ Man. While not a classical Oni in every detail, Baconman unmistakably borrows their core traits. He is green-skinned, perpetually scowling, and driven by a malevolent desire to spread mischief and mold. His very name ties him to concepts of pollution and uncleanness, modern echoes of the spiritual kegare that Oni traditionally represent. Yet his defeats are never final or overly violent. He is simply shown that his mean-spirited actions lead to isolation and failure, while Anpanman's generosity creates happiness and community. Through this simple, repetitive narrative, children learn that selfishness and spitefulness are anti-social behaviors that ultimately leave you alone and unhappy, a powerful lesson delivered by a charmingly grotesque proxy for evil. This educational function extends beyond television screens and into the very structure of early childhood development. The practice of using Oni as a disciplinary tool, seen in traditions like Namahage, has a modern parallel in parenting strategies. A parent might playfully warn a misbehaving child that the Oni will come for noisy kids who don't clean their toys, externalizing the parent's authority into a mythical figure. This creates a psychological buffer. The child isn't directly defying mom or dad, but is instead avoiding the attention of a broader, mythical rule enforcer. This tactic helps establish boundaries and social norms without creating direct confrontation, making the lesson more about navigating the world's rules than simply obeying a single authority figure. In the realm of educational publishing, picture books and manga for young readers are filled with friendly or comically inept Oni characters who learn valuable lessons. A common storyline involves a lonely Oni who just wants to make friends but doesn't know how because its first instinct is to roar and threaten. Through a series of misadventures, it learns that using gentle words and sharing its treasures, perhaps even its beloved dango dumplings, is the true path to connection. These stories serve a dual purpose. They demystify the scary imagery of demons, reducing a child's irrational fears, while simultaneously modeling empathy and social skills. The child learns to see past a frightening exterior to understand the feelings within, a crucial developmental milestone. This gentle introduction also serves to culturally acclimate children to the Oni's presence in festivals and community events. A toddler who has grown up with picture books about a cute, clumsy little Oni is far less likely to be truly terrified by the adults in masks during Setsubun or a local festival. Instead, the experience becomes a fun, participatory game. They understand the script. They are supposed to throw the beans and drive the demon away. This transforms a potentially frightening cultural practice into an empowering ritual, teaching children that they have the agency, through their actions, to banish negativity and invite good fortune into their homes. The Oni, in this context, becomes a manageable and even beloved part of their cultural vocabulary, a monster that is ultimately under their control and whose presence signifies a time for play and family tradition. Despite their fearsome reputation, the idea that Oni are purely and irredeemably evil is one of the most persistent oversimplifications in their mythology. While they undoubtedly serve as symbols of destruction and punishment, a deeper look reveals a creature of immense complexity, whose role is often dictated by context, perspective, and the specific moral framework of the story being told. To label them as universally evil is to ignore the rich cultural and narrative functions they serve, which often go far beyond simple malevolence. Their nature is not a fixed point but a spectrum, ranging from chaotic neutral forces of nature to tragic figures and even, on rare occasions, protectors. A key to understanding this nuance is recognizing that many tales feature oni who operate within a system of cosmic justice. As enforcers in the Buddhist hells, their brutal actions are not acts of random cruelty but the administration of a divine karmic sentence. They are the executors of a punishment that has been rightfully earned, making them agents of a harsh, impersonal order rather than villains acting on personal spite. In this context, their violence is a form of brutal morality play, a graphic illustration of the inescapable consequences of sinful actions. They are the terrifying face of cause and effect, a necessary component in a universe governed by moral laws. Viewing them as evil for fulfilling this role is like blaming a prison warden for the existence of the prison itself. They are part of the structure, not the origin of its rules. Furthermore, numerous folktales directly subvert the notion of the Oni's inherent wickedness by highlighting their capacity for fairness, honesty, and even gullibility. Stories often portray them as bound by their own word, adhering to a strange code of honor that a clever human can exploit. In one well-known tale, an Oni challenges a man to a contest of strength, promising a reward if the man wins. The man, realizing he cannot compete physically, challenges the Oni to squeeze water from a stone. When the demon fails, the man squeezes juice from a pre-hidden persimmon, winning the contest through wit. The Oni, though defeated, honors the bargain and grants the reward, displaying a grudging respect for the rules of the game. These narratives paint the Oni not as a lying, treacherous fiend, but as a powerful yet straightforward being who can be outmaneuvered by human intelligence and who often accepts defeat with a surprising degree of sporting integrity. The most poignant challenge to the always evil myth comes from the stories of female Oni, the Kijo. Their descent into monstrosity is almost always triggered by an extreme human trauma, betrayal, the loss of a child, or devastating social ostracization. Their rage and subsequent evil acts are presented as a tragic perversion of their former humanity, a direct result of being profoundly wronged by the world. This narrative framing generates a sense of sympathy and complexity that is entirely absent from stories about mindless, rampaging brutes. The Kijo is a victim first and a monster second, forcing the audience to consider the circumstances that create evil, rather than simply condemning it as an innate quality. She embodies the idea that monstrous actions can spring from a place of deep, understandable pain, blurring the clear line between human and monster and making a simple judgment of evil feel inadequate. Even their traditional role as bringers of natural disasters reveals a more nuanced function. While they personify terrifying, uncontrollable events like earthquakes and storms, this personification also represents an attempt to rationalize and manage chaos. By attributing a famine to a specific, angry Oni rather than an indifferent universe, communities could develop rituals to appease or drive away that specific entity. The demon becomes a manageable cause for an unmanageable effect. This process gives people a sense of agency in the face of overwhelming tragedy. The evil of the Oni, in this sense, is not an end in itself but a cultural tool for coping with the random cruelties of existence, providing a focal point for collective action, prayer, and the reaffirmation of community bonds in the face of disaster. Finally, the ultimate rebuttal to the myth of absolute evil is found in the instances where the Oni's image is explicitly harnessed for protection. The fierce Neo statues guarding temple gates use the terrifying visage of the Oni, their muscular bodies, snarling faces, and aggressive stances to ward off malevolent influences and protect the sacred space within. This demonstrates a profound cultural understanding that a fearsome appearance does not necessarily equate to an evil purpose. The form can be divorced from its typical function. The raw power and terror associated with the Oni can be channeled to serve a benevolent goal. This symbolic reversal is powerful evidence that the Oni is not an intrinsically evil concept, but a symbolic container for immense power that can be directed toward different ends depending on the intention behind it. Their legacy is not one of simple monstrosity, but of incredible adaptability, reflecting the complex and often contradictory ways humans understand power, justice, and the nature of good and evil itself. From their shadowy origins as hidden spirits to their iconic status as horned, club-wielding brutes, the journey of the Oni is a profound reflection of the Japanese soul itself. We've seen how these formidable yokai are so much more than simple monsters. They are complex symbols woven into the very fabric of Japan's spiritual and cultural identity. They began as vague, unseen forces of misfortune, only to be shaped by Buddhist cosmology into enforcers of karmic justice, the terrifying wardens of hell tasked with punishing the sinful. Their terrifying physical form, the vibrant red or blue skin, the wild hair, the sharp horns and fangs, evolved to give a recognizable face to the abstract and often frightening chaos of the world, from natural disasters to unexplainable personal tragedy. We explored their dual nature as both external threats and internal metaphors, representing everything from political outsiders and foreign invaders to the personal demons of guilt, rage, and unprocessed trauma that reside within us all. Through epic tales like that of Shuten Doji, they became narrative antagonists whose defeat reinforced the values of courage and cunning, while in humorous folktales they were often outsmarted, showing that even overwhelming power can be overcome with intelligence. Their role expanded into vibrant community festivals like Setsubun, where they transformed from objects of fear into participants in a cathartic, annual ritual of purification, a symbol of misfortune that every family could actively drive from their home. And their legacy is far from static. These demons have successfully marched from ancient scrolls into the dynamic world of modern anime, manga, and video games, constantly being reimagined for new generations while retaining their core power as symbols of immense challenge and untamable force. The Oni endures because it is a vessel of incredible symbolic flexibility. It can represent divine punishment, the untamed wild, a historical adversary, a psychological shadow, or a seasonal nuisance, all while remaining instantly recognizable. This adaptability is the key to its immortality in the cultural imagination. They are the indispensable force of chaos that gives meaning to order, the terrifying other that helps define the us, and the ultimate monster that, in being confronted, helps us understand our own humanity. Their story is ultimately a testament to the power of storytelling to make sense of the world's complexities and terrors. So the next time you see an Oni mask at a festival, or a depiction in a game, or even just feel a shudder on a stormy night, remember the deep and fascinating history behind those glaring eyes. What aspects of Japanese mythology or yokai legends fascinate you the most? Were you already familiar with the Oni, or did you discover something new today? Share your own thoughts, favorite stories, or any experiences you've had with these incredible tales down in the comments below. I always love hearing from you. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the world of Japan's most terrifying yokai. Until next time, keep exploring the stories that shape